Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Two Doors podcast. I am here with Erin Zimmer. Erin is a Google developer expert with nearly 20 years' experience in a variety of languages, from JavaScript to Model 204. No, nobody else has heard of it either. She is currently a senior developer at Atlassian with a strong interest in accessibility and usability. And if you see her at a conference, she'll probably have knitting needles in hand. Erin, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks, Alex. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm well, and I'm very excited for today because you're someone I've always seen out there talking, contributing to communities, and giving talks. So, yeah, how have you been? How's life?
Yeah, it's been a lot these last couple of years between COVID and then the company I was working for got bought out. Few job changes around there, and yeah, I've landed at Atlassian, which is going all right for me.
I mean, yeah, it's one of the powerhouses in Australia, isn't it? And what are you enjoying most about them, Erin?
Actually, I had wanted to work at Atlassian for years beforehand, but you had to live in Sydney, and so the whole COVID thing, and I don't know when they started doing remote work, but that actually worked out quite well for me. But one of the things I really like at Atlassian is that they actually take accessibility seriously.
Mm.
So we actually have like a central accessibility team, and we have like goals to meet for accessibility, which I think is super important, and not enough companies like care enough about it.
Yeah, and I want to dig into this and usability with you. So, imagine I'm an 11-year-old. How would you explain accessibility to an 11-year-old?
11 is very specific. I would say that accessibility is about making sure that the biggest number of people possible can use our application, right? So making sure that it's not just people who are at home on their NBN Wi-Fi with top of the line MacBooks, and who are using a mouse and a massive screen. Like it's about making sure that it also works for people who are on their mobile, or people who don't use a mouse, use a keyboard, or for people who have poor vision, so that they need to use different things to help them with that, like screen readers, or even just zooming in the text. Like your website needs to work with the text zoomed in, because we have an aging population. A lot of people have vision problems, right? It's just about making it available to the biggest number of people possible.
You're so right. And I mean, I love my abuela, so Spanish grandma. And she humbles me sometimes because even a few years ago, she had to learn how to use an ATM. Like something that we're just like, that's really basic, 4 digits and stuff. So we have to constantly like think for others, haven't we? And that's great that they're taking it serious. And yeah, have there been any new advancements in that realm and in that field?
Ooh, I mean, they're always updating the standards, but yeah, I don't know if there's any sort of major new things that are happening. Obviously, AI is a thing that people are trying to involve, but it's questionable how useful it is, I think.
Yeah, because it's the human element, isn't it? You can't really break that, the way that they think or thinking for other people. It's like, how can AI conquer that? And what about standards then? So yeah, digging into that a bit more. Has standards changed, or how often are these coming out?
I honestly don't know. There's a group of standards. I just know that we've updated the latest version of WCAG. We're now onto 2.3, I think. I can't remember though off the top of my head. Yeah, but there are a set of standards that companies should be trying to follow for accessibility. There's actually three different standards that we follow at Atlassian, and they're just like there's the WCAG standards that are created by the W3C, and then there are like governmental standards. So the US has a set of standards that it requires companies, well, used to, I don't know if they still do, and the EU has a set of standards that companies are supposed to follow, but they align very closely with WCAG. So actually, the big change, I guess, with accessibility that hasn't quite happened yet is that the EU have introduced new laws to say that companies need to make their products accessible. So starting, I think it's June 30 this year. That's when we're aiming for anyway. You need to, if you want to work with governments or like educational institutes or anything, institutions or anything like that in the EU, you have to meet these standards.
That's brilliant, and that's needed as well. And does usability follow similar suit as well?
So the accessibility standards cover a lot of the usability stuff. So the standards are all things like things need to work when the screen's zoomed in. They need to not be conveyed via visual means only. Like you need to be able to also convey things via text, which I like, so it can be read out. You can't convey things via color, so people who are colorblind can still get access to things. So the accessibility and usability are kind of interchangeable, but yeah, the accessibility is, I guess, more focused on people with disabilities, whereas I guess usability is a bit more broad.
Correct, correct. I like that clarity. And let's talk about technology in terms of, I mean, from JavaScript and Model 204. I've never heard of this before. I love that. And uh, tell us, because obviously you worked with many different languages as well. What's like what's hot right now? What would you advise juniors looking at?
So for the last, I don't know, 10 years, I've been working just on the front end. So it's been absolutely all JavaScript, TypeScript. These days, JavaScript isn't enough. You really need to know TypeScript. Um, it's an interesting one because if you go and work anywhere, they're using React, right? Everyone uses React, or
Yeah.
some of the big enterprise companies, just, Angular, and there are people using other like frameworks, but React is kind of like the one that everyone uses. But if you go to any conferences, half of the talks are going to be about how everyone should stop using React. So it's it's an interesting one, but I think that these days React and TypeScript are a pretty safe bet
Yeah.
if you want to work on the front end.
It,
In the
it
back end, I don't know. I hear people work on the back end. It sounds boring.
it has stabilized though, hasn't it? Like I remember when JavaScript there was like Ember, Vue, React, Angular. Like I was a big Elm advocate, and I was loving what CultureAmp we were doing there because it was different. And then I was like, Elm's the future, and then React just absorbed what they were doing and was like, we do this now, and but it's
Yeah,
not as rocky. And what I mean by that is that people were like having to choose. They were like, well, identify with this one. Let's build on this. But I'm finding now more and more, yeah, it'll be interesting to see where it goes. So what's happening in the front end space? Is there anything really changing at the moment that people should be aware of?
there's been huge changes in CSS actually. That's been really cool. So there's been a big push for like getting all of the browsers aligned in terms of standards. And just bringing in like really cool new features in CSS. That's another thing. You go to any conference these days, there'll be a talk about 20 new things in CSS. So there's things like view transitions, so you can have animations between like different pages or animating things onto the page. Like something you could never do in CSS before is animate to an auto height, which is something that you can do now. Yeah, so there's just heaps of stuff that's coming in. Well, the things that I'm interested in are things that are coming into the platform. So they're going to be available regardless of which framework or library or whatever you're using. And just seeing the browsers kind of, I don't know, in the last couple of years, they've reached a really good level of parity with like a whole bunch of stuff that's been really cool to see.
Yeah, because it used to be quite problematic, wasn't it? Of like getting Internet Explorer, Mozilla, like all the different Chrome, all of them across, and then you're like, oh, I love
Yeah.
that.
I,
I-
I used something the other day, like there's a new method to sorted, which the JavaScript array sort method does a sort in place, so it changes your initial array, and there's a new one to sorted that doesn't do that. It like creates a new array that's sorted. And I had it in a PR, and we've got an AI bot that like sort of goes through and tries to be helpful in the PRs. And it's like, oh, maybe you shouldn't use this. This is a new API. And I'm like, it's been around since the middle of 2023. I think we're okay. Like this stuff isn't so cutting edge anymore.
I love that your AI is risk adverse and being like, look, let's
Yeah, yeah, it's and sometimes it's helpful, but
yeah. And what about any, like, I used to ask, hey, if you could go back and talk to your younger self, like, what would you recommend them for getting into the today's modern world? But we had Baz on the podcast. I don't know if you know
I
Bazara.
know Baz. I used to work with him at Ozpost, yeah.
Oh yeah, true, true. And TypeScript author and
Yeah,
eight-time Microsoft MVP, all of this. And he was
yeah,
saying,
yeah.
I think that's the wrong question. He said, like, what would I advise the new generation? Because it is a different world that's coming in. And what I've seen, Erin, is that there's really been like a big theme of communication coming through, where people are like, hey, if you're a more junior software engineer, like really work on those communication skills. Yes, the technical skills are very needed, but right now it's like more how you convey those ideas or collaborate with people. But yeah, what would you advise the younger generation that are wanting to get into this or the first couple of years into their career?
I would definitely agree with that. It's a tough time to be a junior developer right now. I think with all of the AI stuff, people think that they can like it's the junior developers whose jobs the AIs are taking, right? The AI is taking, right? They're not replacing senior developers. So when it comes to like writing the code, the AI can do that a lot of the time for you, right? It's about those extra skills. It's about being able to work in a team, being able to organize stuff, um, knowing like all of the non coding stuff, like performance and testing, like making sure that you can have the quality assurance of your code. It's all those, yeah, like being a gun coder is fantastic and like yeah, it's good, but it's not the most important skill these days, I think. Which is tough because we don't let people use AI during interviews, so you still need to be able to code well enough to get through the interview. But like once you've joined a team, like everyone knows how to code. But being able to work in a team, being able to like one of the most niche but I think underrated skills is being able to take a block of work and divide it up so that multiple people can work on it at the same time. Like the that's one of the biggest problems we have of trying to get work over the line is that you have one person who's stuck in this pipeline and you're relying on that one person to do this huge big job. Whereas if they can break that up into three smaller jobs, then that can get done three times as fast. So just being able to like think through the actual problem that you're solving and figuring out how to break it down into smaller pieces and then how to communicate those pieces to other people so that you can then work in a team more effectively.
Yeah, so what comes through there is quality, performance, collaboration, really being in a team and breaking those problems down into smaller chunks.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. Like the whole point of working in a team is that you can get stuff done faster. So
True.
anything that you can do to get those features being built faster because you've got more people collaborating together, I think is super helpful.
And you're right about the AI feature in interviews. I've had a friend that was interviewing someone and they could see the AI feature was on. They said, "Oh, excuse me, can you turn it off?" And then the interview just went downhill apparently. But I mean,
Oh, yeah.
I've advised companies that your interview process should be like buy-in from both sides. Like you should both be investing into this as well. That and like doing take-home assessments. I don't think that they're actually useful anymore. Like, yeah, the toy robot test used to be great, but like nowadays when you can just upload everything and download, it's like, why would you? And so it's a hard world to discern if you're a hiring manager, and it's a hard world to discern if you're a junior developer. So, what do you think of the future of technology, Aaron? Where do you think this is all going?
I don't know. It's super hard to say right now. I think we might be headed a little bit for disaster, to be honest. I think we're getting to the situation where, like I said before, we think that the AI can do the work of the junior developers, which means we don't bring on junior developers, which means that we don't have senior developers in 10 years' time. And I think there's going to be a bunch of people sort of our age who in 10 or 20 years time are going to be able to charge whatever we want, um, if we want to keep working because who else is going to do it, right? We're not investing in the future.
Mm.
Well, a lot of companies aren't investing in the future. I should say at Atlassian, we absolutely do. We bring grads in, we have juniors. So there are still companies out there doing it, but then those junior developers who are coming through now are going to be there's not going to be as many of them, right? So they're also going to be in a position where they can probably ask whatever they want for senior developer jobs, and then suddenly developers are going to be very, very expensive.
Yeah.
Um, but companies just to figure they'll save a few bucks today.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm seeing it even with market trends of a lot of these large companies are outsourcing development overseas, and this will be a trend for the next 3, 4 years, and we'll realize that hey, we've not actually saved that much return of investment. Let's bring everything back on, and it's like, what was the point of this massive operation? But like
Yeah,
at the end of the day, it's I love people like yourself, Erin, or we had Ryan Big on the show as well. I don't know if you know Ryan in the Ruby community, and he built the grad system for Culture Amp, and so he's a huge advocate for junior graduates, and exactly to your point that it's like, well, if there aren't juniors coming in, these juniors don't stay junior. Like we're being very short sighted of what the future could look like. So I love that your company's providing and doing that for graduates.
yeah, yeah. It's super important. Like they're the future, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And what about technically, Erin? What would you advise more junior engineers these days? Like, should they be checking out TypeScript? Should they be checking out BFF architecture? What should they be learning and doing?
TypeScript, yep, definitely. That's a no-brainer. Yeah, what kind of tech? I ooh, whatever takes your interest, I think. Like I I say to people when they're trying to like get experience to start with, like, they say, what should I learn? And it's like the best way to learn something is by actually doing it. And I think that you need to go and find a problem that needs solving and then look into the tech that can solve that problem. I think that starting with the solution is kind of back to front. Like,
Hmm.
rather than, like, you could go and look into BFFs or whatever, GraphQL. We're doing a big push for GraphQL at Atlassian at the moment, actually. But if you then go looking for a problem to build with GraphQL, you're just kind of building a thing to learn GraphQL, and you're only going to learn it in a really superficial way. Whereas if you go out and say, hey, my local council needs a website to solve this problem, and I can volunteer to work on that, or there's some open source project that I'm interested in, I can volunteer to work on that, and you learn the technology that's involved in that, that's going to be valuable no matter what the technology is, because you're going to learn principles that can then apply to learning other technologies. Like it's far more important to learn how to learn than to learn any particular technology, I think.
That is very powerful. So being authentic, and that's a beautiful point. Well, I think that, and any imparting wisdoms as we bring this into land, Erin. Any final thoughts? Anything you'd like to share with anyone listening?
Um, Yeah, I think if you're trying to get into the industry, then getting like real world experience solving real problems with real users is the number one most valuable skill that you can gain. So if that means working on open source, volunteering for a charity organization, anywhere where you can get your foot in the door, that means you're working with other developers and solving real problems, that's going to be the most helpful thing to get you in the market, I think.
And it's what I see often of like, hey, actually have that real world experience, not theory, and like just go and try and solve a problem. Like I always respect people that have just tried to build an app because there was something frustrating them, or even if they're in between jobs, they were just like, I build a badminton app that me and my friends we want other people to play badminton with, and I was like, I love that rather than just sitting on your laurels. So thank you so much for coming on, Erin. I've had a great time chatting with you, and thank you for sharing.
Ah, you're most welcome. I can't believe the time went so fast.